This is Heal Your Mind, Heal Your Body with Dr. Schuyler. Discover how your thoughts manifest disease and what you can do about it. Here's your host, Dr. Schuyler.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back. So I have a question for you all. Do you guys ever trauma compete or know someone that trauma competes, where you tell a story and they have to always chime in and give you their story? And it seems like they can't wait for you to stop talking, because as soon as you stop talking, they're going to tell you their story. And it's really infuriating. And you may have even grown up this way. So what I'm going over today is the power of silence, and how we can start shifting how we're treating and talking to each other through the power of silence. And if you've ever grown up, you had a parent or a friend or a teacher or coworker, when you tell a story, they can't wait for you to stop talking, because then they go, oh my gosh, well, this happened and then this happened. And you could be telling the most random story. Yeah, I got rescued off a mountain in a helicopter. And the person goes, yeah, but once I had a friend that, and they always try to like level up on your story. They think they're relating, but they're kind of trauma competing or stress competing. And it almost leaves you feeling like, I was just trying to connect over my story, but now we're talking about your story, and all I want to do is just connect with you. And that's kind of a good example of trauma competing and not using the power of silence to connect with people. And it's really infuriating when we go to talk and then someone immediately chimes in with their story. So sometimes it's not so much the words that we say, it's that sometimes we just don't say anything. And that's the most helpful thing to do. And I call it the power of silence. So I think it's this balancing act of, we need to learn when to just stay in silence, kind of bearing the pain alongside their story, versus when do we start sharing our story so it makes it we can relate to that. So silent listening sends this message that you are in fact listening and you are trying to understand what they are feeling and what they are going through. When we feel heard and validated, it's really connecting. We feel connected to the person. But when we're telling a story and then they quickly jump in with theirs, it's a very kind of a secretive way to feel invalidated, and it just makes you want to stop talking. So even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, you can relate to them under the human condition of just connecting with them. And everybody out there just wants to feel understood, especially when we talk to a loved one. So 9 times out of 10, when we're telling a story, it's because we want to connect to people. We want to feel understood. And the person talking, or especially if you're ever talking, you just want someone maybe to hold the space quietly. And this is so common in men-female dynamics. Women, we can ramble and we just want to be heard. And sometimes the man's brain, brilliantly wants to just solve the problem, but the female's brain just wants to talk and the space be held in silence. And kids have the same, paradigm. Kids need to just listen and just get something off their chest. And whenever my kids are telling me a story, it's not time to impart some light lessons. Sometimes I squirm and I want to say something, but I reply with silence while being attentive with eye contact. And I really try to avoid saying things like understand, because in reality, we don't. We do not understand what they're going through. There's no way we could. And then we like to say, well, back in my generation, the same thing happened. No, it didn't. We didn't grow up in mass shootings and post 9/11, so it's not the same. So when it's your turn to swap roles from listener to speaker, saying something like, wow, I can only imagine how hard that might have been, or thanks for telling me, I loved hearing about that. It's important to me that I understand what your experience is like. That's so cool. I'm here if you ever want to share more. And then hold the space for a second. And power of silence can be very uncomfortable. But I found the person who can hold the most power of silence holds the most power. And when you can use the power of silence, you really can begin to shift and kind of mold how conversation goes. So, to build on the power of silence, I really suggest using what's called verbal and nonverbal mirroring and matching. And this kind of enhances that communication loop. So, when you're subtly mimicking someone's body language, their tone, these patterns, and really I want to emphasize you're mimicking the tone, you create this sense of connection or discord. So these techniques feed the subconscious and the rapport begins to build or the discord begins to build. So if you've ever noticed that someone's talking to you and their tone changes and you're like, yeah, their tone just changed because subconscious you picked up on it and you're like now trying to search for what's happening. The power of silence can sometimes just answer that question. Oh, okay, I hear what you're saying, and then you just let their tone start to tell you more. And this is a form of active listening. Active listening is not trauma competing. It's not comparing who's suffering more. It's not saying back in my day. It involves this silence, this attentive listening. And when you can kind of mirror what someone's going through, mirror their body language. If they sit back and cross their legs, you kind of sit and cross their legs. If they lean in, then you lean in. It's as a parent, as a partner, if we can start learning that we can use the power of silence instead of trauma competing or story competing, you're beginning to show your partner or your child or your coworker that you're confirming that you understand what they're saying. The power of silence confirms to the other person that you are attentively listening to what they are saying with eye contact and you're kind of mirroring them. You're listening like you care. That's a whole new concept. Listen like you care. And when you're listening, you're leveraging the power of silence. And I have found more often than not, when my kids are talking to me, I want to chime in. My kids, I think, are pretty open. There's stories my oldest daughter tells me that sometimes I wish I could delete the data. Sometimes it's just too TMI. I'm grateful she's that open with me, but I do wish I could delete some of the data. But why does she keep telling me all these very, intimate details of her life? Because I listened. She's not out doing drugs or drinking or hooking up. She's just telling me some intimate things about herself. And I just listen and I don't correct her and I don't solve the problem. I listen like I care because I do care. And it's not the time to impart wisdom when someone is talking. They want to share and connect with you. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is when our child opens up to us, we think, oh, let me jump on this. Let me just impart all the wisdom I can. I have their attention. No, you have their attention because they want to share something about themselves with you. And if you can practice this power of silence, and what I've noticed when the 15-year-old comes to talk to me, one of the things that she does is she'll go up like, hey, mom, want to share something? And I feel like this nerdy little kid at the lunchroom table that the cool kid is coming up to my table and talking to me. And I get kind of nervous inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's talking to me. Don't mess this up. And and I forget, this is my child, but I'm so honored and privileged that she wants to come share something with me. I'm like, okay, don't talk, just listen, listen. And I get all giddy inside and she's out of that really awkward 11, 12, 13, 14 age, and 15, 16, 17 they start to come around a little bit more. So I'm really having to use this at home too for myself. So not only clinically do we use the power of silence all day long, the amount of things I can get people to say the power of silence, and women out there listening, a man takes longer to process what they're thinking and feeling. If you sit a little bit longer and don't talk or interrupt them, they're going to say more than they would have said initially. Because what happens is the second they start to talk, we want to connect with them. But what I'm suggesting is just sit and listen, and they're going to talk a little bit more than normally would have if you just hold the silence a little bit longer. Because we're so used to talking, talking, talking. Men don't typically talk as much as us. So this is really, really helpful. And I treat half men and half boys. And I hold the pause a little bit longer for my male population because there's usually a 3 to 5 second lag in their pause of train of thought. And if I interrupt that, I'm going to miss some critical information. And sometimes I've held the pause a little bit long and I see them looking down and looking around. They're searching for what they want to say next. And usually it's something really powerful that they say. And because I sat in that uncomfortable power of silence, they opened up and revealed something, discovered something about themselves. So this is applicable all across the board, not just with your children. So the power of silence includes modeling. So your child, whether you recognize it or not, at a certain age still admires you. Maybe later on in life, they may not. But early on, your child really admires you. And if they can see you holding the space as they talk, guess what they're going to do for their friends? Guess what they're going to do for their partner someday? They're going to learn to actively, attentively listen, and you're going to model these positive language techniques. You're going to model how to communicate better. Your child is more likely to listen to you if you model for them what listening looks like. So when you hold the space when they're talking, they're more likely to hold the space for you. And this is going to be the next episode. So I'm going to just gently dive into this. We talk about tone, but many parents are very disrespectful on how they speak to their kids. And they chime in and they overtalk rather than using the power of silence. And they're unhappy with their child's behavior because they're saying my child's talking to me so disrespectfully, so sassy, and I got to just teach them how to do this. And it just baffles me, and why it's going to be a whole nother episode is how children begin to snap back at parents because the parents have modeled snapping back rather than holding the space, just kind of safely, quietly holding the space and hearing somebody like you care. We snap back in defense and we begin to talk disrespectfully. And now imagine if you go to talk to your partner or your boss or a friend and you tell them something, they snap back at you. You're going to want to snap back. You're not going to be sending sunshine and rainbows back their way. But we expect our children, when we snap at them, to talk back to us in this respectful, kind way, but yet we just couldn't hold the space and we snap back at them. We're not modeling for them. We're not modeling emotional regulation. We're not modeling the power of attentive, quiet listening. So if you can imagine your child being spoken to by their partner the way that you're speaking to them, that's how to model it. How do you want your child's future partner to speak to them? That's how you should speak to them. So, what you want for your child is how you should be speaking to them. Would you be proud if they married someone who speaks to them the same way that you speak to them when you're angry? This is a tough question to answer, and some people it may even offend. Well, that's my child, and I can talk that way. I'm not going to argue that point. What I'm going to say is I want to shed some light that the way that we're speaking to our children oftentimes can be seen very disrespectful. And the things that children report back to me, their parents say to them, it hurts me. It just hurts. It hurts to hear these things. And these children having depression and anxiety. And the way that you talk to your child is going to influence how they view communication later in life, how they're going to communicate to their partners, how they're going to be communicated to. So it's taught me this valuable lesson that the power of silence, when I care about what someone is saying, is so important. It's more important than giving my feedback right back to them. And when I do offer my feedback, and let's say they tell me something that's offensive or upsetting, even holding that power of silence a little bit longer so you can respond and not react is the difference between disrespecting and respecting someone in your response. And silence gives children a space to process what they're feeling or thinking. It gives anyone the space to process what they're feeling or thinking. So if you ask a question, remain silent, it encourages a child or anyone to reflect on what their own thoughts are rather than you doubling down and being very reactive. And it also develops cognitive abilities, and it also really fosters emotional intelligence. And there's two gifts I wish I can give the whole planet. It's the gift of failure and the gift of emotional intelligence. If we could learn to master emotional intelligence and teach our children this, where emotional intelligence is not acting defensively, but holding the space in an effort to respond rather than react, we would all treat each other so differently. And sometimes children feel really overwhelmed when they're talking about difficult topics. Any human feels overwhelmed talking about difficult topics. When you use the power of silence, and you can even be tapping your foot or pinching yourself to stay quiet, but more people are going to open up when you have attentive power of silence because they feel safer. This also facilitates problem solving. As parents or partners, we want to jump in and solve someone's problem. They're complaining. Sometimes I would say 10 out of 10 times people are complaining not because they want you to solve the problem. We vent because we just want to vent. We'll solve the problem on our own. Unless they say, hey, can you help me solve this? We're just venting, people. We just want to vent. When you can learn to stop solving the problem and just listen to it, it fosters independence and critical thinking skills in our children. It reduces power struggles. When children are upset or in conflict, silence can be used to diffuse the tension, not silent treatment. That's an abuse tactic, an emotional abuse tactic. Not silent treatment, that's an abuse tactic. What I'm talking about is attentive silence. Arguing back or offering immediate responses escalates the power struggle. Silence gives both you and the other person time to think and calm down, which leads to more productive, connected, empathetic conversation. It also builds this comfort with emotions, talking to somebody who may not be emotionally regulated. Your silence gives them a space to experience their feelings without you needing to fix or resolve them. It is not our job to fix or resolve other people's emotional experiences. That's their emotional experience. All we have to do is hold a safe place for someone to have them without getting defensive, without getting mad, without getting angry, without screaming. You're teaching someone it's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel sad. And silence teaches children this natural rhythm of conversations. It helps them learn when it's their turn to speak. And that sounds so weird, but take an inventory. Just do me a solid. Take an inventory of a 24-hour span in your life. How many people in that 24-hour span followed the natural rhythm of conversation? And out of those people, how many couldn't wait to trauma compete or stress compete with you or cut you off? Very few people in the world today have a beautiful natural rhythm to conversations. Only if you've been practicing active, attentive, silent listening do you begin to enter this natural flow and this rhythm of conversation, which really begins to reduce the other person's stress level. So when used thoughtfully, silence helps people grow emotionally, cognitively, socially. And it's this really valuable tool for parents, caregivers, partners, friends, educators, that when we use it in a healthy, adaptive way, the power of silence is powerful. The more time I have spent in the power of silence, just caring about what my kids think as if I'm being paid to do so at work, I have gotten them to open up to topics I never thought they'd ever tell me, and kind of in the delete data catalog. But what's cool is that I provided a space through the power of silence that I get to learn about my little humans. And I have said this recently. I think the hardest job as a parent is to raise our child how to become their authentic self and how to foster, how to create, how to protect that authenticity. And I really have found that working with kids since 2005 and talking to probably thousands of people by now, the power of silence offers people the opportunity to find their authenticity. Because if I'm always barking off my thoughts, my feelings, my take on it, I'm not allowing that person space to find out who they are within the problem. I'm not offering that person the space to find their solution. And I think as parents, if we can, or humans on this planet, if we can begin to regulate our own silence and really build this valuable tool, we connect with other people, begin to experience this natural flow of a conversation, I think you'd be surprised how much you're going to learn about yourself and about the human in front of you, what they can teach you about themselves. And as a parent, protecting your child's growth and authenticity is a great gift you can give yourself and you can give them. The next episode coming out really is going to springboard on this, and it's Sticks and Stones May Break My Bones, and disrespect breaks my heart. So I'm going to get over into the power of disrespect and how intense it can be for our children, and for you to think as a child, were you ever disrespected, and how that impacts you. All this is covered in the book, which is out now. It's Empower Your Child to Heal. Some people are interpreting the book as Empower Your Inner Child to Heal. So the book is for if you have children or if you don't have children, and it's talking about things: stress, contagion, attachment style, the power of silence. It is a map from birth to adulthood of how parental influences, attachment, stress, contagion, all these things that no one's talking about, all these pink elephants in the therapy room that lead to why we have anxiety, gut, and autoimmune issues outside of nutrition, outside the medical community. So you can find on Amazon or Drafted Digital or Income Sparks, Empower Your Child to Heal. You can also get a free chapter of the book on drskylar.net, and you can sign up actually for tips that's coming out and little sneak peeks into the new book, Rewiring Your Heart, which will be out in 2025. And it really gets into this really cool science behind the heart stores memories. I'm sending you all in so many happy healing vibes and abundant blessings, everybody. Thank you for your time. I feel so grateful you have listened to the end. When we begin to understand how our body manifests stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, and even unexpressed emotions, we then create a space, a bandwidth in our minds to begin to heal our bodies. Healing is a decision, and I am grateful for yours. Abundant blessings, Dr. Skylar.
To learn more about the work Dr. Skylar is doing, please visit drskylar.net. That's DRSKYLER.net. And remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you like to listen.
Produced by Audavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.